It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Carlyn Montes De Oca. Orca, I said to her before, please excuse my New York accent, even though I've lived here long enough. Carlyn is a multi-winning author of Junkyard Girl, a memoir of ancestry, family secrets, and second chances, and Dog is my doctor, cat is my nurse. She's a staunch animal advocate and has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, Women's Day magazine. She grew up surrounded by secrets, and after taking a DNA test in her 50s, she discovered that her parents weren't her biological parents. And most of her extended family knew the truth, but never told her.
Oh, gosh.
So join us for a candid conversation about her multi-award winning book, Junkyard Girl, a memoir of ancestry, family secrets, and second chances. Carlyn will also share her writing process and tips for marketing a memoir. Welcome, Carlyn.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm so grateful that you got my first name right, but I know that many of you may not because it's spelled differently than it sounds. So I want you to remember my name, so this is how you will remember it. Carlyn. Okay, I'm really pleased to be here. I love being with other storytellers and people who are just passionate about words the way I am. So it's a real pleasure and I'm very honored to have been asked. I'm just curious, who is writing memoir or has written memoir? Okay, quite a few of you, yay. Well, I never thought that I would ever write a memoir. It just wasn't on my scope until something extraordinary happened to me. What I've discovered is that memoir may not be romance, but it sure can be a love story. And my memoir became a love story, not only to the truth, but to my family, and also ultimately to myself. So again, I never believed that I was going to write a memoir, but I always had this massive desire to write. And that happened as a child. I was surrounded by dogs. Dogs were a great love of mine. I was also surrounded by books, old, dusty, musty books, but books instilled in me so many amazing ideas and places, images of faraway places that I wanted to visit. And my dogs were a great comfort to me. So we always found ourselves together and I'd read to them and dogs. And, I grew up very lonely. So having books and having dogs was an amazing thing. But the thing is that I never thought that I would have another love, aside from my husband, who I adore. But at the time, I came up with a third love, and that was movies. I used to go with my sister to the movies on Saturday afternoon, Saturday matinees, and then went to the drive-in. Who remembers drive-ins? Yes. Okay, so we went to the drive-in, and I loved that. But there was one movie that absolutely changed my life. And I grew up in Southern California in a little town called Carpinteria. And my brother and I went to the movies one day and saw the most extraordinary movie. There were lightsabers and creatures. And then I couldn't even put the popcorn in my mouth because my mouth was open, but I was just staring at everything. And then I heard the words, "May the force be with you." So I take it from the laughter, y'all know what that movie is? And I remember sitting there and looking and thinking, God, I want to do that. Of course, I didn't really know what doing that meant. I just had the thought and I didn't know what it involved. But many years later, I went to film school at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And there, whereas all my other classmates were taking practical things like engineering and business and science, I was running around with a film camera for 4 years making short films. But after I graduated from Loyola, I got to work for George Lucas. at Lucasfilm up in Northern California. I was an assistant editor and I worked on movies up there, and I went back down to Hollywood and worked on movies there. So I had quite a life in the film business, and I loved it. But I did not know that the film business could be a really tough taskmaster. And by that, I mean, my hours were so long and I was eating poorly. I wasn't exercising, I wasn't sleeping. My stress levels were high because there were a lot of stressful personalities in that business. And one day, it had been 20 years, I'd been working in the business. And one day I got a pretty dismal doctor's report. And when I looked at it, I said, I gotta make a change. And so I did, and I still wanted to write. And the natural course would have been, oh, go sign up for, writing courses. But no, I decided to get a master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine. So I burned out, I went, and Chinese medicine was amazing, and maybe it was more natural because it had helped me a lot get through all those long hours, it helped my health and wellness, and it taught me a lot about that, but I became an acupuncturist up in Northern California in the Bay Area, and it was awesome. And what it helped me do that I had no idea, because I wanted to still be a writer, but I didn't know what to write about. I didn't know how to create characters with depth and complexity, but as I sat there with my patients and they would share with me about their lives and about their health, I started to get a real deep dive into people's personalities and into their psyches in a way that really inspired me to start thinking about character. So one day I remember waking up, because even though I loved acupuncture and I loved doing that for people, I loved helping them, I wasn't writing. I wasn't doing the thing that was really calling to my heart. And one day I literally woke up and I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, you know what, if not now, then when? If you don't do something now, then when will you ever? And I pictured myself on my last day, thinking to myself, I never did what I really wanted to do, what my heart called out to do. And I knew I would regret it. So that was the day I took being an author super seriously. I went out and got a book coach. I learned about publicity. I learned about marketing. I really immersed myself. And another thing that created was an epiphany of sorts. What it did was I started to go into my practice and I looked at my clients in a whole other way. I started to notice something, that even though, let's say, a new client would come in and they didn't know me, they were entrusting me with their health, but they didn't know if I could help them or if acupuncture could help them. And they'd cross their arms in front of them and they might look at me a little sideways and they wouldn't be smiling and they might even be a little defensive. As soon as they started talking about their animal companions, their dogs, their cats, their horses, suddenly that smile would come out, they'd uncross their arms, they'd lean forward, they'd look at me, they'd start to laugh. Some of them even started to cry. And as a health practitioner, I thought to myself, oh my God, this is amazing, because you want those kind of reactions. You want that energy to keep moving. You don't want people to just be all stressed and hold it all in. And I'm sorry, somebody said, oh, yeah. You don't want them to hold it in. And what I started to realize was, physiologically, that guy's blood pressure is going down. That woman's stress levels and cortisol levels are diminishing. Cortisol, of course, is the stress hormone that creates all sorts of problems later on. And instead, they were getting more healthier hormones coursing through their system, oxytocin, and they had feelings of well-being, and it was an amazing thing. And I thought, look at what's happening from them just telling me a story, not actually engaging with their animals, which would create even more benefits. So I thought of that, and at home, in addition to this, I had or I had at the time 6 rescue animals. So I had 2 cats and 4 dogs, and they were all rescues that had come from, unfortunately, neglect, abuse, abandonment. And despite all of that was going on with them, or that had occurred to them, they still taught me a lot about life, about love, about forgiveness, all of these things that really improved my well-being. And that's when I came up with the idea for a book called Dog as My Doctor, Cat as My Nurse, and that became my first book. And with Dog as My Doctor, Cat as My Nurse, I mean, my dream was always to write, but I just had this inner critic that said, you can't do it, nope, 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 nope. But when it came out, it was like my dream had come true. Not only did Dog as My Doctor, Cat as My Nurse get published here in the States, it was published abroad. It won, I just counted, and it actually won 9 awards. And it was amazing because I did this book tour, which I call the Positive Book Tour, which is spelled PAWSITIVE. And I aligned with different rescue organizations at every single city we stopped in. And they came in, we adopted animals at every single event. It was an amazing thing, and always 10% of my proceeds always went to different animal organizations and rescues, so that made me feel amazing. And the book was picked up by media all over the place. I had dozens and dozens of interviews with television and press and radio. It was a really amazing time. But I have to say, one of the greatest things about it was the connection to the readers. I mean, people started writing me, people I didn't know, they started sending me emails. And I love this. They would say, I really resonate with what you wrote. And the thing is, I really believe what you're saying. I just was scared to ever talk to anybody else about it because I thought people would think I was crazy. And I've read your book and now I know I'm not. So I really love that. And all of my books really are focused on the animal-human bond. Like the next 2 books were, and all my books are back there so you could look at them, but this one was called Pause for the Good Stuff. Again, spelled P-A-W-S, Pause for the Good Stuff. And these were gratitude journals that were focused for dog lovers and also for cat lovers. And what these do is that they inspire people to create more gratitude in their life. Focused, and they do this by having a strong relationship with their animal friends, and this creates gratitude. And gratitude, if anybody has a gratitude practice, they know how powerful gratitude can be, especially to cope with the many challenges of life. So I had just finished Pause for the Good Stuff, and I was thinking, what else should I write? What's my next book? What is my next book on the animal-human bond? And of course, the universe threw a nice little wrench into my life with this seismic news about my adoption. And I was so blown away. I don't know if anybody has gone through that where they've discovered they're not exactly who they thought they were. And it really is something that pulls at your foundation in a way, in an extraordinary way that I have never experienced before, because everything is built on our foundation. And this was as if somebody had just taken the rug and everything kind of collapsed. And so I felt a real need to write that story, especially because it was so extraordinary. What happened is stuff that happens in other people's books or in other movies, not to me. And so I wrote this book, and I want to share a little bit. I thought I would read a passage from it. And the passage will also lead to, we're going to be doing an in-conversation together. And I think this really does build a foundation for that in conversation. Okay, so this is chapter 3 of Junkyard Girl, and it's called Shock and Awe. Something big has happened in our family, and I have to talk to you about it, my sister Lily said as we stood in my kitchen in Santa Fe a week later watching the electric tea kettle boil. Is someone sick? Who died? Is Ray getting divorced? Is Art okay? I spewed out every conceivable disaster that came to mind. Lily shook her head slowly, her complexion a tad more pale than normal. I realized if any of these catastrophes had actually happened, my sister would have simply picked up the phone. Would it be so important that she felt compelled to hop on a plane and fly 3 hours in the heart of winter to tell me in person? Let's just get our tea and sit down, okay? The tone of her words were missing their typical lilt. Ever the caregiver, Lily plopped tea bags into 4 colorful mugs. As she covered them with steaming water, I stepped behind her so she couldn't see me silently mouthing more potential calamities to my brother-in-law. I must have looked ridiculous because he half-heartedly chuckled, a sound that didn't match the worry in his gaze. His calloused hands gripped the counter behind him, as if steadying his brawny physique. He glanced at my husband, Ken, who offered no help whatsoever, being in the dark as much as I was. David, a retired firefighter, always on the ready, was accustomed to facing all manner of emergencies. Today, he looked ready to battle a blaze. The 60 seconds it took the 4 of us to walk from the kitchen into our living room and settle into our respective seats felt endless. Something big has happened in our family. Lily's words echoed in my mind. I'm not a patient person. I seek efficiency. I like finding the quickest, smartest way from A to B. This brief minute of waiting was taking an abundance of self-control. It'll be over soon, I told myself. Be patient. In a few minutes, you'll know what this is all about. Lily sat beside David on our cat scratch couch. Ken and I faced them on our wicker chairs. I crossed my legs tightly, holding the large arms of the seat for support, wondering if anyone else could hear the pounding of my heart. My sister said something unintelligible. Then her eyes met mine and she burst into tears. I'm sorry, she apologized. Through choked sobs, she turned to her handbag, rustled through it, then pulled out 2 sheets of paper and a pair of stylish reading glasses. I thought this might happen, so I wrote it all down, about a dozen times on the plane, she said. She dabbed her cheeks with a Kleenex, slipped on her glasses, then held the pages out in front of her. Her actions gave her a few seconds to compose herself. She sat up straight, something my mother had always nagged her to do, and her hands trembling, began to read. Carlyn, about 3 weeks ago, you forwarded an email from Martha Baptista. She wanted to get in touch with you and see if you knew how you might be related. At that point, I knew we needed to break a promise to my parents that we made as children. When we were young, you mentioned to me how differently you felt about the world and from everybody else in the family. Then, as a young adult, how eagerly you looked forward to getting away and making your own life. Secretly, I envied your attitude. You began exploring different places and experiences with a passionate energy. You grew and developed into an extraordinary human being. Today, I have a story to share with you, which began even before you were born. This story is the best I can remember, though not perfect. Carlyn, you were adopted. And with these last 4 words, I was unmade.
That's pretty incredible, Carlyn, and a pretty incredible thing that happened to you. Why did you decide to write about it?
I did not, I know we always have a choice, but it felt like I don't have a choice. This story, well, for 2 reasons. One is I'm a writer. So all of us know we have to write our truths and write what, and I have discovered that when I write, I try to make sense of the world in some way or something. So I write about a topic that's so important, and I think that helps with my writing, that I'm very connected. So this story was very powerful in my life, and I just felt I had to get it down. I mean, I didn't start writing right away. first I had to deal with the shock and the trauma, because it was pretty intense to suddenly learn that not only did my parents keep this from me for 57 years and then my siblings, but also I had 63 first cousins. I have a massively large family and everybody knew about it. So I had to really deal with that. And I'm the kind of person who I need to know, if you guys all have a secret from me, you better tell me. Because I need to know the answer and I will do what I have to do to get the information, even if it's bad information. I just need to know the truth. And so I needed to spend about a year really processing everything that had happened, trying to work through it because oddly, I always consider myself a pretty strong person. I'm not a big crier, but yet every 10 seconds I'd be crying. I'd open a book, I'd start crying, I'd tie my shoes, I'd start crying. So I had to deal with all of that was coming up. And I had to actually go on the rampage talking to every single 63 first cousins I had, everybody. What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? And so it took me a year, but then I felt like, okay, I've got some space with this. I can pull out what I've learned from this, which I think is really important. And so I wrote because I felt that I had to, and there was no other way to do it.
Yeah, you mentioned you had these 63 cousins, and you got a lot of information from them, and probably a lot of background that you were never aware of. So when you started writing the book, and you started to process all of this, did you hold back in any way?
How so?
And I'm sure there was some anger, there was some frustration, there were some things you heard from some of these relatives that you might have wished you'd not heard. So how did that factor into your writing of the book and putting a memoir together?
Well, first you write your first draft, your discovery draft. So I was going to put everything down that I learned, no matter what, in that first draft. Everything, including things that I wondered about. And in fact, I did have an editor at the beginning, a developmental editor, because I'd never written a memoir before. And so I thought, oh, I better make sure that this is actually any good, or is this right, or is this how you do it? And there were some parts in there that I said, look, these moments, I mean, they're very personally, like, these are things I haven't even told my family. I don't necessarily, I feel like maybe they're beneficial to the story. What do you think? And she said, you don't have to put that in. She said everything, and so that actually was a relief that I could take that out. And you always have the choice. You don't have to put every single thing in. So I sort of felt that when 63 first cousins and your whole family, and now we're talking hundreds of people, because these 63 first cousins are married, they have kids. Some of them were younger than me. It's like, how did you know? And so I sort of felt like you all lost your chance. I'm going to write my story and I will share it with my siblings because they're the closest ones to me. But everybody else, you know what? I'm writing that story. So if you guys had told me ahead of time, maybe I'd consider it. But so I just decided to be as honest as I possibly could. And that was my guiding light.
It sounds like your writing process is a lot like many authors. You have an idea in your head, you just want to get it down, and then you go back and say, all right, a lot of this has to come out. A lot of it, you put a lot of backstory in that's helpful to you as a writer, but you've got to pull a lot of that information out. And I'm sure just writing it down was cathartic for you in many, many ways. But can you tell us a little bit more about your writing process? How do you keep yourself going as an author?
Well, I would say that how I keep myself going is I'm very much into, before I put anything down on the page, I'm very much about what's going on in my head. Like, I used to have a critic that was in my head and it was very loud. And the other day I noticed that critic is very loud. It's there, it's always there. But I think as time has gone by, the more I've written, the more anything you learn, you keep doing it, you learn more. And I believe that I keep learning from book to book, like, oh, I know I can do this better. And the book I'm working on now, I can see how I've learned a lot from writing Junkyard Girl. So I feel that my writing process is much faster than it used to be. And it's not weighed down by the critic the way it once was. And I've forgotten your question.
Like, just tell us a little bit more, like, on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, yeah.
Do you set aside a certain amount of time to write? How do you find that time to write, which I think a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're writing, haven't been writing all of their life. So how do you deal with the distractions? How do you keep yourself on track?
Right. I think I'm pretty disciplined, and I learned to be very my parents were disciplinarians, so I think I started there. But then in the movie business, you have to be pretty disciplined and pretty organized. I mean, I learned a lot from that. You had to know where every single piece of film was stored, and so it was just very, very, very much that way. And I tend to be a planner. You heard the whole thing of planners and pantsers. I'm a planner, and I like to have an outline. But in terms of what you're asking, so every morning I wake up and I do a lot of self-talk. We live in a very challenging world, so it's easy to get up every morning and suddenly go, oh my God, that was a day. And I've decided, I'm not going to have any more of those days. So I do a lot of kind of my own little, spiritual kind of stuff that I do that isn't religious, but it is spiritual. And I get up and I do a lot of gratitude practice, and I'm like, okay, what is my priority is to write. Monday through Friday, my priority is to write. And right now I have had life pulling me in all sorts of directions. So I'm only really writing 3 hours a day on my new book. But it was very outlined using that save the cat method. I don't know if you all know the save the cat method.
Tell us a little more about that.
Save the cat method. Well, I really defer to the people who wrote it, but it's a method where I think it began as writing scripts, right? And now it's developed into novels. Great. And there's just certain milestones that you hit along the way. And it forces you to just really think before you start writing. And that's important for me. I like to kind of know. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through my discovery draft of this new book. And I'm finding like, whoa, gangbusters, this is great. Everything is working. Everything is working according to these milestones you have to hit at this percentage of your book, at 50% of your book, at 75%, you are just kind of hitting that. So that's a method that I like to use and I'm involved in very much. And I think I will continue to use it because it seems to be working so well. So it's not like this every single day, every single day of the year. There's times that I also write a Substack, blog. So I'm working on that Substack blog, or I have to write an article for some, magazine or whatever. So I'm working on those things, but I do a lot of marketing. So I have to spend a couple hours, an hour or whatever, looking at those things. And I consider that part of my author kind of writing life. But actual writing itself, I believe I do my best to go 3 hours. But during NaNoWriMo, you all know what that is? Then I really crank it. If I can get onto that November schedule, I'm going for I think it's 1,666 words for me is what I try to write.
You mentioned marketing, and I know for a lot of authors, they think, okay, the book is done. I'm going to upload it to Amazon. I've got to publish it. They're going to take care of marketing. And that's not the reality of life anymore. I always joke and say, yeah, if your name is David Baldacci or James Patterson, you don't have to worry about marketing. But the rest of us do. Can you tell us a little bit about marketing, and particularly how you go about marketing a memoir?
Sure. Well, again, this is my first memoir, but I did learn a lot about publicity and marketing after Dog is my doctor, cat is my nurse. I actually took a very intensive thing back east, and it was really great when Dog is my doctor, cat is my nurse came out, and because I did get a publicist because my publisher insisted I needed a publicist. And I said, but I think I know how to do this. I mean, I learned all this. She's like, you need to get a publicist. I'm like, all right. But then I loved my publicist. She was wonderful. But I said, you go to West Coast, I'll deal with the East Coast, and let's just get as many, people, as many interviews as we can. And we got, I think it was like, I mean, something like over 50, well over 50. Oh, it was amazing. And so so in terms of Dog is My Doctor was my first attempt at really understanding marketing and how you did it. And also I found that I quite enjoyed it. I mean, I'm pretty outgoing and I love networking with people. I love connecting with people. I'm very passionate about the organizations I'm involved with. All of them are animal rescues or animal welfare organizations. So what I discovered in my marketing, and this is a tip that I always tell people, is go regional. Go regional. I mean, there's so in your region, in New Mexico, with Junkyard Girl, I found so many outlets. I still have a massive page of things I haven't followed up on because I haven't had a chance. But with Junkyard Girl, I mean, it got into the Santa Fe New Mexican and the Albuquerque Journal and KRQE television. And there's with all the different organizations I'm involved in, I got to go speak in front of them, and they have all their audiences. And so these are my tribes, and every time I find a tribe, like now I have a pickleball tribe, so they all come to these events. And so it's been, I learned a lot with Dog is My Doctor about networking and not being afraid of it. And everybody's in the same boat, everybody's human, and people just want to connect, and everybody loves their dog. So I have found a huge tribe from other people who care about animals and know the healing benefits that animals can provide us. So I spend, and I do a lot of podcasts, and recently I had an episode, oh my gosh, it was crazy. But this is how this happens. It's like I've already developed all these contacts with different people with podcasts and radio. And what happens, I'm, the person who writes about dogs and talks about dogs and this and the other. I leave my dog Grace the first time ever with somebody else, and she runs away. So it ended up being at the New, and then I got her back in the most extraordinary way. And so the New Mexican calls and goes, "Can we do an article on that?" So it's really nice because, and they, the last word with Carlyn Montes, she called me and said, "Can we do an interview?" So it's really nice how things, you get established with people and then they'll call you back, and and the ball keeps rolling and rolling. You do have to push the ball though. Every day you have to push the ball. Do one to three things every day to move it forward, but you'll see results.
For these interviews and speaking engagements, do you get paid for those, or do you consider that a marketing expense for your business?
Right, both. I do both.
Okay.
So I've spoken internationally and gotten paid. It depends who's asking.
Okay.
For animal organizations, I'm not really wanting to take any money from them because, and they've offered to pay. I've spoken at the Santa Fe Animal Shelter in front of their big donors, and that was really amazing. But I don't, for those places, I don't want to take, I'm already donating to these places. I don't want to take the money from them. But if it's something else, and the thing is, I'm really a solopreneur. And I wish I had 3 more of me to help me get those speaking gigs. And so I sometimes reach out, but right now I'm just so focused on writing and marketing, at least to, my small circle. But yeah, I love to speak in front of people and I would love to do more of that. But so I would say, so both.
So what advice would you give to first-time authors, and especially those who may not be quite as outgoing as I believe you and I are, to get the word out about their book? There's a lot to getting the book out into the world. So what advice would you give to them, especially if they didn't have the benefit of a publicist?
Right. Well, and just so you know, I did not have the benefit of a publicist in this second book. I did it all myself, and I got all of that myself. And even my publicist who had retired, just do it yourself. You already know what to do. So the advice I would give is I always start at the beginning. I'm the kind of person I want to build. I don't like to start up here. I don't like to wing things. I like to know kind of where I'm going and build and know as much as I can. So I always start, and I really highly suggest this because there's a million things you can do to market. There are a million things you can do. And you'll sit there and just kind of get rattled by all the things, and then you hear a new thing, and you go, oh, maybe I'll do that. Oh, maybe I'll do that. My friend did this and it worked for them, but it doesn't work for you. So I start with, what's my why? Why am I even doing this? Why am I writing? Why am I marketing? Why am I going to these links? And for me, my why is I want to write. I've always been a writer, and I love animals, and I want to help them. And that's really my guiding light. For somebody else, it might be completely different. It might be, I want to really help the homeless, or I really want to help, or I'm not sure what you're all writing about. But I always say, what is your why? And why is that important? And I start with that every single morning. And another thing that I would suggest is, be confident in what you're writing. And I want to share a little story that I learned from, and these were like these gurus back on the East Coast or the Midwest, somewhere in Pennsylvania. And they taught me a lot about publicity and a lot about marketing. And I remember when Dog is my doctor, Cat is my nurse, I'm still working on it. And I got to talk to the head guy at this organization, and he said, so what's your book? And I said, well, it's Dog is my doctor, Cat is my nurse, and it's a book of blah, 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 blah. He goes, okay, just stop talking. He said, we're gonna hang up, but over the week, I want, the next time you talk to me, he said, I want you to say, my book is called Dog is my doctor, Cat is my nurse. And it's a book about living a healthy, happy, and extraordinary life with the companionship of your animals. And, whatever the third thing is, and he said, I want you to say that, and I want you to say it with confidence. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I just really cringe. I'm like, no, I can't. And he goes, don't call me again until you can do that. So for the next week, I literally would be driving, and I figured nobody can hear me in the car. And, nobody would be in the house, and I'd go in front of the mirror, and I just keep saying, I'm the author of the upcoming book, Dog is my doctor, Cat is my nurse. And it's a book about, and I did it, and I did it, and I did it. And the next time I got on the phone with him, he's like, what's your book about? I go, the book is called Dog is my doctor, Cat is my nurse. And it is a book about, and I said it with such confidence that it was the thing that I realized, oh my God, it's keeping me back. The big thing in my head, the critic is saying, no, don't say it. You're too small, you're too weak, you're too this, you're too that. And so and every single thing I do, I believe adds to my confidence. Every single podcast, every single event, every single person I speak with, it is. So I would just say for those of you is think about where you may be shining away from your light and who you are and why your message is so important. Just look at that for a second and just take a step forward and go, no, I will. I'm going to do this. And just really talk yourself into it, because that's what I do. I talk myself into it every day.
Thank you. I know from my own experiences, writing books, marketing books is a continuous journey.
It is.
Yes. And it's something that you never stop doing.
Yeah. And you shouldn't count on, as you said, on your publisher. They're not. I mean, you're right. If you're J.K. Rowling or something, they will.
Mhm.
But if you're the rest of us, they won't. They'll do something. Like, what if somebody said, well, but they did put out a press release. I go, you can put out a press release. It takes like 10 seconds. I can do that. You can use AI to write a press release for you now, and they can, put it out. That's not a big deal. And to be honest, and I'm not saying, I think everybody should make, I think every choice, for me anyway, I decide this book, it's independently published. This book, I'm going to look for somebody because I look at the market or what I feel would be the best thing. But, I sometimes think, well, a publisher, there's not big advances anymore. They're not going to be doing anything for me marketing wise, not really. They're going to pick a cover that they're going to decide on. I am not. I may get 3 chances. And to be honest, I fought for this cover. My publisher wanted to put a cat on there, and I looked at it and I said, you know what? That's the kind of cat that rich people have. I want a tomcat. I want like a stray cat. She's like, no, this is good. And then I did a survey of my own. I said, here's 50 people who all agree with me. She's like, fine, do whatever you want. But other, and then, you know, and I was grateful. I mean, I think they're a fantastic company and they did great work on the interior and the editor I really liked. But, you know, in the end, there's so much you can do being an independent publisher. You know, like even I heard somebody say something about talking to Disney. I just had a production meeting as well, you know, for Junkyard Girl. And no agent got that for me. I got it on my own. So I also wanted to speak to the effect that, yeah, I may seem like an extrovert, but I don't feel I really was. I used to be very much more introverted, but also when you're looking for, gee, who can my tribe be? Who can help me promote this book? Because if you're doing it all alone, you know, that's a lot of work. You get an animal organization around you who promotes your book, or you get other super fans that promote your book. You know, where are they? So if you're an introvert, anybody an introvert here? Can somebody tell me what they enjoy doing in their life, like hobby-wise, or what? Somebody tell me something as an introvert that they enjoy.
Gardening.
What was it?
Gardening.
Gardening, excellent. Master gardeners in Santa Fe, right? You are like, you know, I'm a gardener. I love gardening. So maybe I should be looking for that tribe too. But you go and look and join organizations, join meetups, go to these things. There's probably other introverted gardeners there as well. And it's amazing what you will strike up in a conversation. Somebody will say, you know what? My cousin is, you know, an author, and, you know, they're looking for people in their groups. Or how would you like to talk at a book club, you know, and it can be online, so you don't even have to look at everybody. Or, you know, or maybe there's a nursery out there who would love to have an author come out and just kind of talk with the other people. And they might let you set up a table because you're a gardener and maybe your book is on gardening. Or, you know, there's countless ideas you can have as an introvert. And I will say there's things like Toastmasters, which helped me a lot. Believe me, I totally tanked the first time I ever spoke at public. Tanked in such a bad way. But I took Toastmasters and I belonged to a business group called Business Networking International. And slowly, one step at a time, you know, I got to talk, and it was amazing to also see processes who were introverts. And suddenly they're just talking in this, and introverts sometimes get the best audiences because they, you know, you speak from your heart, and that's very attractive.
Well, I've been asking a lot of the questions here. I'd like to open it up to the audience and see if you have any questions for Carlyn. You sure can.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. My name is Samir. Come and get the quite some time. And I'm just trying to analyze your experiences, and I'm sure that a personal reflection of your own life. It's all writing. I mean, your animal experiences, but then you start with ancestry and then second chance. So one compliment I must give you is that you have come a long way, baby. How was it? Well, I haven't graduated yet. It doesn't mind you fathoming what it's all about. But tell me something. Give me some undercurrent thoughts of what the impulses were from Junkyard Girl to second chance. And this second chance led to something.
So basically, I think what you're asking is what the subtitle is. It's a memoir of ancestry, family secrets, and second chances. How did I move from one through to the end? Is that I'm understanding your question? Yes. Okay, so it's a memory of ancestry. So of course I took ancestry DNA, just so you know, that's the thing I took. And I'll tell you just a funny story with that, in that I took the ancestry test and I was so busy. I was working on positive good stuff. It's like I got it, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't think about it. And the only reason I took the test was because my mother insisted we have a lot of Jewish blood in our family. And also I thought it'd be fun. I've always been interested where our family comes from. Montes de Oca actually is an area in north central Spain. So I thought, no, I'll take it. But then I was so busy, I didn't even look at it, really. If I had, I would have seen, and in big letters, it said, this person is possibly related to you, and this person could be a sister. And so I got this, and the reason, it was crazy because one day I was on Facebook and I kept getting these messages from some guy that I had befriended, but I didn't know who he was. And he says to me, you know what, you look an awful lot like my wife. Kind of flirt or whatever. And I said to him, yeah, no, I don't think so. And he's like, look, and he sent me pictures. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think we shop for glasses at the same store. And then he says, well, ancestry DNA says different. And yeah, he ended up being married to my true half sister, you know, that we discovered through ancestry. So this is how the ancestry began. This is how that story began. And of course, it was a family secret. 63 first cousins all knew, you know, lots of other people all knew. Not only did they know in the States, but in this entire town in Mexico where my parents came from. You know, if you read the book, you'll see it'd be like, God, you know, I felt like I was under a microscope. So, you know, here are these family secrets. And to be honest, I've met now many people who have gone through not exactly the same thing, but something similar. And I don't know one who hasn't been just, I mean, it is a massive destruction to your psyche and to who you think you are. And you kind of have to build it all up again. You can't just go, okay, that's it. Okay, great. It is like nothing I've ever experienced before. And many people ask people, aren't you angry? Are you angry at all these people who did this to you? And, you know, how do you stay in a family who keeps those kind of secrets? And, you know, I love my family, and people make mistakes all the time in families, and I've certainly made mine. And, you know, it wasn't like a family I wanted to lose, but I had to get to the other side. So this is what I talk about when I talk about second chances. It's, we had now a whole second chance, and my second chance was what I learned, even though it felt like a massive severance of these ties. It's like, where do I belong now? What family do I go to? By the end, it was like, I go to the family that I choose. I choose my family. And that has been an extremely like awakening, eye-opening experience for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Is there anyone online who has a question for Carlyn?
Don't see anything.
Anyone else in the room?
I have a question online.
Oh. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, first of all, thank you, Carlyn. My name's Mary Therese, and I am also an LMU alum. So I was excited about that. And I
Yes.
also did not do writing. I'm a mathematician. But my question is, it sounds like, and maybe you said this and I missed it, but it sounds like you're writing full-time now as potentially your career. But I know it wasn't the career you started in. So can you talk a little bit about how you made that transition from writing being a hobby to actually saying, no, this is my full-time career now, and how long that took, and just what that process looked like?
Well, I guess I never had it as a hobby. I guess I just had it within my head, like I'm going for it. This is what I am meant to do. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna go for it. And did you listen to that moment that I had when I looked at myself and I said to myself, if not now, when?
Yeah.
If not now, when?
Yes, I wrote it down.
Yes, so that
Always
was the
good to
moment.
keep in mind.
Yeah, so my book, I was trying to figure that out the other day, because my doctor, Kat was my nurse, came out in 2017. And I think it took me, I'm embarrassed to say, I probably did like 5 years to write it, because I didn't know what I was doing. And so, but when, so I guess I just had it in my mind, this is never a hobby. This is my calling. This is my passion. This is what I'm doing. How do I make it happen? So, but you know, I spent 4 decades just mulling it in my head. You know, I want to write. I don't know how to write. I want to write. No, you're not good enough. You know, I had those, you know, arguments in my head for a very long time. So, yes, I'm a full-time writer, and you know, living in New Mexico actually cemented that one for me, because my husband and I lived in Northern California, and I was an acupuncturist and I had a practice. And at that time is when I wrote Dog is My Doctor. But then we decided California was just very expensive. and very crowded, and we lived in a beautiful area, but my husband came up with, let's move. Let's go somewhere really cool where you could write all the time and the cost of life won't be as expensive. And, we can do something different. And we ended up in Santa Fe, and I've been writing full-time since then. And and it's been kind of a dream to be able to do that.
Sam, I believe you had a question.
Two questions. Earlier you spoke of milestones and gave examples of page count, basically. Were there other milestones like character development or plot? And the second question is did you ever find out the circumstances of your adoption, and what was that, out of curiosity?
Are you not gonna read my book?
Perfect answer.
Actually, I'll probably forget both questions, so let's start with the first one. You asked about milestones in the Save the Cat method, because that's the method I used for my new book. I wasn't using milestones to write God is My Doctor, because also that was a work of nonfiction. In Junkyard Girl, to be honest, I didn't have that method available to me yet because I just wrote it. And also I kind of have a filmic mind. Working as a film editor for all those years kind of put me in like, oh, you sort of naturally sometimes know those kind of milestones. So I'll just talk about Save the Cat because that's what I'm using now. So the way that I learned, they make you think about all these things before you outline it. They make you think about character development. They make you think about A and B characters. They make you, depending on your genre, there's certain questions that should get answered before you even start. And so I think that, and in fact, this is where I tend to err as a writer. I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist. So I'm trying to answer all those questions, and then I end up having 20 pages, which I guess is fine. But yes, you go through all of that. So in my new book, I've thought out those characters really well. And of course, they develop as you write. But I am hitting those milestones, and I had written a whole thing like, okay, at the 50% of my book, you get to the midsection, I forget what they call it. And these are the things that should occur. And they have like this little bold thing. And so I check them off. Is this happening? Is this happening? Is this happening? And then I write below that, I just bullet, like, this is what I believe is going to happen in this story. And then I go and I write, and I'm thinking, okay, but maybe this happens. And so I try to keep for me to that format, because at least at this stage in my writing career or in my writing life, I need that format. Maybe 3 books from now, I won't need it anymore. But yeah, it definitely, helps you flesh out your characters.
Before we get to some of the folks in the room, anybody online have a question? Okay, let's start over here.
I wanted to go back to memoir. That was my interest today. So when you were doing Junkyard Girl and you were doing the rewrite, can you talk about some of the decisions about what you decided, not the content specifically, but the thinking on how you selected things you decided not to keep in the final, number one. And number two, how did your concern about people being angry with you for telling the truth play into that?
Okay, can you please, I can never go past one question. So can you please repeat just quickly your first question and then ask me your second question after?
So how did you go through the process of deciding what to not include as you move forward with the editing?
To be totally honest, this story was very easy to write because it was so my story, and there was just such an urgency for me to write it. So it wasn't hard, and I outlined, again, I'm an outliner, and I took a class on memoir and was seeing, well, am I following what I think is supposed to happen? And it seemed like, yes, I was. And then I actually gave the outline to my developmental editor. And she said, yep, go for it. This looks good. And then there were two things I think I took out that my developmental editor said, yeah, you don't need them. One of them I wish I had left in, but one I did take out. So to be honest, it wasn't hard for me. I also, the story just kind of came out. And also I know, I didn't want it to be more than 300 pages. And I also, because I'm somebody who, I actually like to read books that move. I'm taken by the story, and so therefore I like to write that way too. And I come from a movie background, and we're moving things, we're constantly moving things. So it wasn't a hard decision, but I guess I will say that I also, in my writing process, once my discovery draft is done, and this time I didn't use a developmental editor for my new book, but I give it to 5 beta readers that I really trust. And these are people, actually, I've been very fortunate. For some reason, I made a lot of friends that were journalists after Junkyard Girl, and they're all like, we'll read it. And so I'm like, great, an editor. So I give it to 5 that I think, this is a genre that they might resonate with. And I get their notes, I see what's working, what isn't working. And so I take that and I see, well, maybe I disagree with that person, but that person said that too. So I'm taking like, okay, more than one person said this. And I put that into the mix. And then I rewrite and I rewrite. I mean, I think I went through 11 drafts of Junkyard Girl. So.
And the other question was, concern about folks not liking you telling the truth.
I feel that they lost their chance about that. I do. I feel like they lost their chance. They should have told me I was adopted from the get-go. And truthfully though, my parents were no longer here. Those were the people I would be really the most concerned with, but if they were here, we would have had a lot of conversations. Lots of things going on. So after that, it's my siblings. And it's like, okay, but again, maybe if you could ask me who was I the most disappointed in, it's my siblings. Like, geez, I would have told you, you didn't tell me of, and I always felt very close to them, and I still do. But I gave each of them a copy of the book in advance, and I said, you need to read this or not. But and I remember my one brother said, you can write anything you want. And then my other brother said, you never sent it to me. I said, I've sent it to you 3 times. And then he never said, so I'm like, fine, I'm publishing. And my sister was the one who had the most, like, I want you to think about, from my parents' point of view, this, that, and the other. And I took that into consideration, and it made me go, okay. So I added that. And my 63 first cousins were beyond excited, and some of their names were in the book. They didn't care. They were like, this is great, And so with that book, I don't know if I'll ever write another memoir. Oh, I think I will, but probably after certain people pass. But I just sort of felt like, no, and actually I was told by a bunch of my cousins, you write whatever you want to write. You need to heal. You need to heal from what just happened. So that's how I worked through that.
And we have time for one more question, and there's somebody online. So
Gina, if you can make it quick, go ahead, unmute.
Okay, this is a follow-on to the last question, basically. Did you take any legal precautions? I wrote a memoir that was pretty sensitive to the family, and I actually had a legal review on it, and I didn't take all of their comments, and I also changed all the names. I'm just, curious what kinds of things you might have done.
Yes, well, listen, there was one section that, all right, I'll tell you. It's my developmental editor said, your ex-husband here. And so even though people wanted to know more about him, I took out a lot. And I changed that name. And when I read it and reread it, and I said, there's nothing anybody can sue me about here. I'm not saying anything negative about that person. I've changed the name. Even if he saw it and read it, it's like, what do you sue about? There's just nothing in there. Yeah. And there was one other person who could potentially be contentious, and they just said, go ahead, it's not an issue. And I was very careful about writing that person, and also because I care about that person. So I wrote very lovingly about that person, and also nothing that I believe that could ever be an issue. I mean, there's just nothing that was said. So I didn't have any legal forms or anything, but I can't see anybody else in that book There's nothing that was written. It was really from my point of view, and nothing was said critically to the extent that it wasn't honest.
Thank you very, very much. This was an excellent presentation.